right, today I wanted to predict some stat lines for some key players on the Aggies for 2023, talk about a couple of areas of concern on the team, and just kind of predict what they're going to do this year. For instance, the team didn't get very many sacks last year. I want to predict what they're going to do there this year. Let's predict Evan Stewart's stat line on the year. Noah Thomas, a couple of these guys who we expect big things from. I want to talk about their numbers and put into perspective our expectations for them on the year. But first, it was an eventful weekend in the world of Aggie football. First of all, we finally got media back at practice. Shout out to the media members who go to practice and record and give feedback on the small glimpses that they see. They get about a 20-minute session that they're able to go in and look at the team and see what's going on. And it's mostly drills on air, warm-ups. They get to see a couple glimpses of lineups, but nothing set in stone. But the first thing that I noticed once again was the dynamic between Jimbo Fisher and Bobby Petrino. In every clip that I'm looking at, I'm looking for those two guys at some point in that clip. And the thing that I noticed once again was that Jimbo is floating from position group to position group. He's no longer just fixated on the quarterbacks. He's actually floating around with notes, observing the whole team from a bird's eye view rather than being in the quarterback's ear the whole time, which was his job before. But now he gets to go and be the true CEO, and we just get more and more evidence that he's doing that and he's embracing that. And all of that smoke about him and Bobby clashing over control of the offense, I think that's all slowly going out the window, and it's not really going to be an issue going forward. At least we don't think so. We hope not. But we really don't think so based on the little glimpses we're seeing over time. So we're seeing that big picture come together there. And another thing that kind of comes to mind with that dynamic is that there's a major contrast between the way that Jimbo treats his quarterbacks and the way we've seen and heard that Bobby treats his quarterbacks. Bobby, as we've heard time and time again since he joined, is a very laid-back guy. All the players, that's a significant thing that they notice from Bobby, is that he's laid back, he's chill, he's calm, he's even-keeled. Jimbo was very much an aggressive coach that was very, very hard on his players, and of course his players were the quarterbacks. I mean, you just remember time and time again whenever a drive would end, Jimbo's there kind of yelling, getting in the face of the quarterbacks, just very, very aggressive, a very aggressive style. And that's not a bad thing. That's just a different coaching style. Different styles for different coaches. Maybe you treat each player personality a little bit differently as well. But it's good to see a change because this team needed change. So the change in energy in that dynamic with the quarterbacks and the coaches, I think that's a great thing. I think that's a great change up. You got to try different things because obviously the last couple of years it wasn't working. So I really like to see that. And then the couple glimpses we saw of the quarterback drills, Bobby just keeps being even killed Bobby. So really cool to see that. I thought that that was significant. But just more glimpses of practice drills. You can't take anything too seriously just yet. But it's just really good to get glimpses of this coaching dynamic. And of course, they finally scrimmaged. The first scrimmage of the fall camp was this last year. We don't know what happened. We don't have eyes in there. And you have to look out for the insiders to actually get the scoop about what happened in that thing. So look out for that. But it's just a sign that the season is right around the corner. And guys, we are itching for football. I can't wait. This might be the most I've craved at the start of a season from the start of fall camp. Between the start of fall camp and the start of the season, this might be the strongest I've craved seeing the team. Just because last year was so lackluster, you saw glimpses of greatness versus LSU, and you just hope this team can build on that, plus the whole Bobby dynamic. There's just so much to look for, so much change, so much improvement, and it's so weird because in college football, a lot of times that excitement is generated from new players, and especially this transfer portal era of football where you could get like a 4-year starter and you'd be excited about seeing that guy, but we're excited about seeing the same team basically go out there and just be better. So it's just really cool to see this thing going through its course. One scrimmage in the books. We might be a week or so away from getting some quarterback information. Maybe, maybe not. After the second scrimmage, they might make a decision. We don't know yet, but this thing is in the full swing. And then finally, over the weekend, Texas A&M nabbed another 4-star offensive line commit out of the same high school they got Mark Naboo out of in Isindre Afua, the 4-star interior O-lineman. Great to see recruiting keep chugging along. We hope this thing finishes really strong, and there's some momentum building now. So that's great to see. Okay, and now for the topic at hand. I wanted to predict some season stat totals for the team. Players on the team, aspects of the team. You'll see what I mean as we get going. But the way I wanted to do it is set Vegas-like over-under numbers. For instance, win totals. I think Texas A&M's is 7.5. So if you bet that you're betting that A&M would win over 7.5 games, so 8 or more games. If you bet under, you'd predict that Texas A&M is winning 7 or less games. So we're going to try to set these numbers as accurately as possible, and in doing that, we're going to try to set a realistic baseline for the year. What's realistic? What do we think is going to happen? What do you think Vegas would set? What's like a nice number that would be a starting point for some of these players on the team? And I took last year into account. I took potential progression from year 1 to year 2 or year 2 to year 3 of these players. A lot of these players were freshmen last year that I'll be mentioning, and they're sophomores this year. Reason to believe that there will be improvement on the year statistically, production-wise. So those are all the things I have to take into account. And I want you guys to tell me if I'm on or off with those numbers, if I set them too high or too low. These are what I feel are realistic baselines for some of these stats. So let's go. All right, so starting off with quarterback total passing yards on the year. Connor Wigman, Max Johnson, we don't know who it's going to be. Whoever it is, I'm setting the total yards passing on the year at 2,850. Last year, all 3 quarterbacks combined totaled 2633 yards on the year. I am predicting whichever quarterback will have a baseline set at 2,850 on the year. I think that's a reasonable number. Obviously, we're hoping for that thing to get into the 3,000s. That would be a really productive year. We'd feel pretty good about that, or even higher than around 3,000. But I think 2,850 is a reasonable starting point to kind of place our expectations on the year. I think we're going to see improvement. I don't think you can argue otherwise, because you're going to have a single starter go out there who I think we'll all be pretty confident in, whoever ends up winning this thing. And there's a good chance they're going to keep that position for the duration of the year. So you're going to see a lot more continuity there, a lot more trust there, and just a better quarterback overall. So I'm expecting improvement. The number's 2,850. What do you guys think about that? And then a couple of those young receivers, Evan Stewart, Noah Thomas. Starting with Evan Stewart, he got around 600 yards last year. I forget the exact number, but right around 600 yards total last year. He is set to make a major improvement on the year. He's clearly wide receiver number 1 going into the year. It took him a few games to get into the swing of things. I think he got his first touchdown versus Arkansas last year, and he really had some good moments as the year went on, especially versus Alabama comes to mind. I set this year's number for Evan Stewart at 850. I think he could go above that. He could be a 1,000-yard receiver, but he could also be around an 800-yard receiver, and I think that's a good year. I think that's reasonable. So 850 is the number I came up with there. And then for Noah Thomas, who is really set to bust onto the scene, we've been hearing about it since spring. Best player on the offense this spring, as said by many people who were in the know. Supposed to make a huge jump. We have no serious, basis of comparison, because last year he really didn't play that much. He wasn't a regular. I'm setting the bar pretty high at 600. I think that's a pretty high bar for an over-under number on kind of your first year getting into production. Now, there's a chance he smashes that number, but there's also a chance that, those things look good in practice, but they take time to develop on the field. So I think 600 is a fair number considering we haven't seen him before. What do you guys think? Can he hit over that? I think it's very possible that he destroys that number. But 600, the number for Noah Thomas. Into the running back room, I know we're going to have 3 guys. I'm pretty sure all 3 will play. I think we'll see a lot of Le'Veon Moss and Amari Daniels early, but I do think Ruben Owens is going to get a lot of burn this year, especially as the year goes on. He's going to get into the game. I truly believe it. So I'm going to set his yardage on the year, his total yards on the year at 550. And once again, coming from no basis of comparison the year before, he's a true freshman in a room that's very competitive with 3 guys. I think 550 is a very fair starting point. It may be a little high because you really don't know what you're going to get from that room or how the dynamic between the 3 are going to work. But I think 550 is reasonable because I think he could really start exploding as he gets more experience as the year goes on. We know he has the raw tools, the raw talent. He's the most talented back that we know of in that room. I mean, anybody could bust out onto the scene from that room, but we know Ruben has a ton of talent. So 550 for Ruben Owens. All right, and then a little bit of a goofy stat, but I think it's pretty pertinent to what was happening to the offense and one of the big issues with the team last year. That is number of starting offensive lines. So by that, I mean, how many different starter combinations are we going to see? How many different sets of 5 are we going to see start for Texas A&M this year? And yes, I'm including injury, and you cannot predict injury, but injuries were a major area of concern with this offensive line last year. Players in and out all year. Bryce Foster's the first one that comes to mind, but then backups were getting hurt. Players were, getting suspended. Lots of issues with continuity on the O-line. Continuity was the big buzzword on this offensive line, in my opinion. I set this number over under at 2.5. Now, there's going to be an injury. Something's going to happen. But how many times are we going back and forth? How many backups are getting hurt? How many times do we need to shuffle players in and out? How many people need to get benched? The lower this number, the better for this team, because the offensive line seems to be the main holdup on this offense, the main question mark on this offense. If the offensive line is good, there's no reason the rest of this offense can't perform at a super high level on the year. But if the offensive line struggles, players are in and out, you don't feel as good about your chances offensively this year. So 2.5, that's the number I'm setting it at. And then finally for the offense, points per game. Last year, Texas A&M averaged only 22.75 points per game. So you need an improvement there. You have to be scoring closer to 30 to have a chance at some of these games. I set this number at 29 points per game. So we're talking a pretty big increase here. Do you guys think that's reasonable? Is 29 really high for an over-under on the year? I just think that offense was really young. You had no continuity in the quarterback room. You had no continuity in the O-line room. You do lose A-Chain, but you have 3 good backs that can kind of handle that thing together. Hopefully there's improvement all around, because I think you got to get close to 30 if you're going to have any kind of decent year. So I'm setting that number at 29. What do you guys think about that one? And speaking of points per game, I said we averaged 22.75 last year. Well, they were holding other teams to 21 points per game last year. So can they replicate that? Moving over to the defensive side of the ball, I'm setting their season over-under number at 21 points per game. 21 last year. They were pretty good on defense last year. Not good at stopping the run, but they had the top pass defense by yards per game in the league. I mean, in the country. So can they improve the rush defense? Can they keep building off that effective pass defense, even though they lost Antonio Johnson and Jalen Jones to the NFL? I think it's possible, so I'm setting that number right where they were last year, 21 points per game. What do you guys think? Another big issue on the team last year was a lack of pass rush, only getting 19 sacks on the year. So there needs to be an improvement, and there will be. This defensive line was so young. The whole defensive line is back for the most part, besides a few transfers. But there's plenty of talent to go around here. The edge rushers should be improved. How much will they improve? That's the big question. Can they dial up the blitz in other ways? I think they will. I'm setting this number at 25, even though it was only 19 last year. I think just naturally, players are going to improve. That D-line was so young. You get McKinley Jackson and Fadil Diggs back to start the year. Hopefully, no injuries, please. But 25 sacks, guys. Is that a reasonable number? I think 25 is a great baseline for the year. And then finally, interceptions on the year. This team was great at stopping the pass last year, but they weren't great at getting many of those big-time, game-changing interceptions. Obviously, that could totally change the momentum of a game, especially depending on the part of the field where you get your interception. Think about Damani Richardson's interception versus Bama, how big that one was just to stop that red zone drive. Last year, it was 4 INTs. I'm setting the over-under total this year at 5. So are they going to improve? I think so. I would lean that they are, so I'm setting that thing at 5. What do you guys think there? And that's it, guys. Those are the numbers I wanted to cover with you guys today. What do you think of my over-under numbers? Am I too high, too low? You guys let me know. And if my numbers are spot on, where are you hitting on those? Are you going over or under on some of these numbers? I'm so excited for this season, guys. That's why I wanted to do a video like this, just kind of visualizing the year, trying to put things together in our mind. Cherish this moment, guys. The whole thing is ahead of us. We're still a couple weeks out from week 1. The puzzle pieces are coming together. We're getting close to unwrapping that present that is the team for 2023. We hope it's a good one, guys. So give me your feedback. Subscribe if you like this kind of content, and I'll see you on the next one. Thanks, and gig 'em.